started because loan payments couldn't be met. They tried to auction off some of the properties. They didn't even make enough money to pay the auctioneer. Now, in the midst of all this, in 1931, John Stimmons joined the company, or as he called it, the shop. His brother Story, who was already a successful attorney, joined a few years later. Now, you would think, here these two bright guys are, well-educated, their dad's president of the company, you would think they would have a white-collar job, right? You'd think they'd have it easy, right? Well, maybe part of the time, but not when it rained. Because when we had the kind of rain like we had last night, where about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, a bolt of lightning makes you wake up right there in the bed, and the thunder that follows lets you know this is serious rain coming to town. The city of Dallas had not been able to hold up its part of the bargain. They hadn't been able to construct the sewers to take care of that rain overflow. It all just went straight into the Trinity. So when that happened, in the middle of the night, John Stimmons would go down and start manning the pumps, and his brother Story had a rake that weighed about 50 pounds, and it would be his job to keep the debris out from in front of the drains. Now, if John had been in a singing mood back then, he might have sung this old Sons of the Pioneers song this way. All night I manned those pumps by hand because I knew I oughter pump that cold, wet water, while Story raked trash from the grates. That's hard work for a lawyer, pumping cold, wet water. Then with the dawn, the worst was gone, and the crew came on, and I thought I hate cold, wet water. All right, let's move up to 50 years ago, 1948. What was happening then? Well, Truman was president. For some people, that was hard to say. President Truman. They got so in the habit for 12 years of saying President Roosevelt. President Truman just didn't trip off the tongue. Also, Truman just wasn't presidential by Washington standards. There was a Washington matron that spoke to Bess Truman, and she said, "Mrs. Truman, I'd like to talk to you about your husband's language." She says, "The other day he said that the head of the union was full of manure, and he said that the Congress, the stuff that they were saying down at Congress was all manure. Can you get your husband to stop using the word manure?" And Bess Truman said, "You don't know how long it took me to get him to say manure." 1948, the big movies had red in the title. The Red Shoes and Red River. The big song was Buttons and Bows, East is East and West is West. Broadway audiences flocked to Finian's Rainbow and Kiss Me Kate. Do you remember what gasoline cost 50 years ago? 17 cents a gallon. Also for 17 cents, you could get a pack of smokes. By 1948, Neiman's had finally given in. They had installed escalators in addition to just elevators. Story Stimmons was out of the Navy and had come back to the shop. John called him the Walrus. But the Walrus turned into a first-class salesman for the shop. There was also some new blood around the shop. Lee Halford was on the scene, although it would be 20 years before he would join the shop officially. And the third Stimmons brother, Leslie Jr., had made it a family affair. Now, unfortunately, Leslie Sr. didn't live to see all three boys working at the shop. He had guided the shop through the dark days of the Depression, and he had to deal with civic leaders and editorials in the Times Herald. Whatever happened to the Times Herald, too, while we're celebrating birthdays here? And as the family said, he just wore out. Well, being worn out was something that Ann Roberts could identify with back then. She was selling and traveling for the shop. You know, there's only 168 hours in a week, and sometimes to Ann Roberts it must have seemed like she was working every single one of those 168 hours. If she had had time to kind of stop what she was doing and to look up and look around, what she might have seen was the Mercantile Bank with its clock tower was now the tallest building in Dallas. The Village had grown to 350 1,000 people. There were 15 high schools and 400 churches. And there was building going on. In 1947, the Trinity Industrial District had 15 buildings. The next year, it had tripled to 45, and the year after that, it had more than doubled again to 98 buildings. More ventures were coming the shop's way. A number of them involved a man that John Stemmons called the wild scoundrel, Trammell Crow. 256 buildings in 1951, 310 the next year. Then the shop donated land for a new highway, a new freeway. And before it was even complete came the home furnishings mart. There was nothing like it.